Welcome to the Super Memory for Schools program. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ngap Kim, a history teacher. In this lesson, we will learn how people create time calculation, know some concepts of time, as well as how to calculate time in history. Our lesson today includes two main topics. The first part is learning about the lunar and solar calendar. The second part is learning about how to calculate time. Let's start today's lesson with the first part, which is learning about the lunar and solar calendars. Do you know that since ancient times, in order to meet the needs of production, especially agriculture production, people had to observe the natural world? It was from observation and calculation that the ancients knew about the laws of movement of the moon, the earth, and the sun. They based on that to calculate the time as well as make a calendar. About the calendars, there are two basic types of calendars in the world: lunar and solar calendars. So what are lunar and solar calendars? Let's find out. The first is the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar is a way to calculate the time according to the period of the moon's rotation around the earth. The time it takes for the moon to complete one revolution around the earth is 1 month. The solar calendar is a way to calculate time based on how long it takes for the earth to revolve around the sun. It takes 1 year for the earth to complete one revolution around the sun. Do you know that the inhabitants of China, Egypt, and the inhabitants of the East, including Vietnam, often use the lunar calendar? Meanwhile, the Romans and many people in Europe use the solar calendar. Thus, we have just learned together the first part in today's lesson. It is learning about the lunar and solar calendar. Let's move on to the next part of today's lesson. It is to learn about how to calculate time, to see how people calculated time in the past. At the moment, in the world, people calculate time according to the time calculation of the solar calendar, called the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar follows this rule. The calendar takes the year of the beginning of the Christian era, when Jesus was born, as the first year of Anno Domini. Before that year was before Christ, or BC. From year 1 onwards, time is counted as Anno Domini. Please remember this detail. Besides the definition of AD and BC, you need to remember some other time concepts, such as a decade, a century, a millennium. Accordingly, a decade is equivalent to 10 years. A century is equivalent to 100 years, and a millennium is equivalent to 1,000 years. To understand this problem better, let's do a small calculation to know how to calculate time. I will use a prominent event in our history. It was the Haibatchung Uprising. The Haibatchung Uprising took place in 40 AD. So, how many years is the Haibatchung's uprising far from the time you are living now, 2021? To calculate, we will use a simple math, that is, subtracting the year 2021 from the year 40, that is the year in which the Haibatchung Uprising took place. We will have a number. The Haibatchung's Uprising took place 1981 years from where we are today, equivalent to 1 millennium plus 9 centuries plus 8 decades plus 1 year. As you can see, it's a very simple calculation. You can use this calculation to calculate how many years ago an event took place. Do you know that currently in Vietnam, we use two types of calendar in parallel: the Gregorian calendar and the lunar calendar. The Gregorian calendar is often used in state documents. As for the lunar calendar, Due to its special meaning to the cultural and spiritual life of the Vietnamese people still widely use the lunar calendar in calculating important events, such as New Year's Eve and ceremonies. Like the calendar you see on the screen, the Vietnamese calendar always has two parts. The large number above is the date of the Gregorian calendar. The small number at the bottom is the lunar month and year. So when you look at the calendar from now on, I hope you can use this knowledge to determine what time is happening. Thus, we have just spent our time learning the main parts of lesson number 2, time in history. After completing this lesson, students need to remember the following basic details. Firstly, you need to understand the definition of the lunar and solar calendar, how to calculate time, as well as the concept of time in history. I hope that with the knowledge I provided, you can study better in grade 6 history, geography. Thank you for accompanying and supporting the Super Memory for Schools program. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.